Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to our UCLA Arts Lunch Labs. I'm Jane McCarthy, Director of Outreach and Engagement for the School of the Arts and Architecture. In this series of midday talks, we will meet with UCLA arts faculty to explore the various research centers of the school. Today's conversation will focus on CityLAB, an architecture and urban research think tank based in UCLA's Architecture and Urban Design Department. CityLab's work explores the possibilities for cities to grow more livably, sustainably, and beautifully. CityLab was founded in 2006 by Professor Dana Cuff. Her work focuses on affordable housing, modernism, suburban studies, spatial justice, and the spatial implications of new computer technologies. Professor Cuff was most recently named 2020 Educator of the Year by the American Institute of Architects, Los Angeles. And joining Professor Cuff is Gustavo Leclerc, Assistant Professor and Associate Director of CityLab. During this conversation, please feel welcome to put any thoughts or questions in the chat. And at the end, Professors Cuff and Leclerc will be able to address these. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Professor Dana Cuff.
Thank you, Jane. It's really a pleasure to be here, and we look forward to having a conversation with questions and answers after the presentation of our work. I'll just say as we begin that CityLab, which started in 2006, has grown dramatically over the last 14, 15 years to include three components, really. The first is the original CityLab, which has as its mission opening new possibilities for cities writ large through the lever of design. So we initiate all our own projects. It's all students and fellow faculty colleagues who undertake and initiate the work. And all the work we do is public, and you can find it on our website, citylab.ucla.edu. Everything we do is in the public domain. In 2019, we started CoLab, which we decided that somehow CityLab being on the west side and on the campus wasn't as engaged with the city as we wished it were. And really Gustavo Leclerc, a PhD from UCLA in architecture, is the sort of director of that satellite CityLab, which is based around Lafayette MacArthur Park neighborhood. And we're spending, a really long-term committed amount of time working with our community partners there, because we think that's really the way that we might model how cities would grow into the kinds of urban worlds we really want to live in. It's not something that you do in an abstract way from a university lab, but really with the field base on the ground with real long-term involvement with our community partners. And the third component is one that started in 2012 when we realized we didn't have a great enough engagement with really what the university is best at, which is education. And so we started the Urban Humanities Initiative with generous funding from the Mellon Foundation. And that's a graduate program that brings together students from all across campus for a year, and they receive a graduate certificate, which is sort of like a minor for a graduate student from any home department. We have students apply in the spring, and they are selective. It's a very selective program. I'm selected for the following year. We take 8 architecture students, 8 urban studies students, and 8 humanists. And together those students work across their disciplines to learn more about how urban life could be transformed, learn more about urban life and cities and their material culture, but also how cities could be transformed through that in-depth knowledge. And ironically, or maybe it's not so ironic, it's one of the only programs on campus which has this intense year-long focus and is cross-disciplinary. So it's a real opportunity for students from all departments to get a kind of engagement that I think UCLA is perfectly situated to offer. Gustavo, I don't know if you want to add anything to that before we start the video?
No, the CoLab, the satellite urban lab that we started last year, yeah, we focus in the Wesley Pico Union MacArthur area because we see it as a microcosms of the larger social, economic, cultural, and demographic changes that are affecting larger parts of Los Angeles. And also that our focus is on spatial justice. And with the aim to find creative ways and methods to build compassionate communities, compassionate neighborhoods.
Great. Well, with that, I think I'll share my screen and welcome you to a video that we produced, the work that CityLAB, Urban Humanities, and CoLab have done just this summer. So I'm hoping you can see that screen now, and I'll play the video. Okay, here we go. Welcome to CityLAB Opens House, Activism in Design and Dialogue. This is in UCLA's Department of Architecture and Urban Design here at UCLA, and I thank you all for joining. While we meet in virtual space here on our screens, UCLA resides on land that was and remains the homeland of indigenous Gabrielino Tongva peoples, to whom we pay our respects. When we're able to return to that land, we will rededicate ourselves to paths of reparation and to caring for the environment, because as architects, urbanists, and humanists, we bear special responsibility to its past, present, and future. This afternoon, we have an exciting program centered on the idea that all communities deserve the dignity that creative design brings to people and cities. Moreover, that our work must aim to steadily redress both everyday inequities and systemic injustices. For the UCLA students and faculty in the audience, I'm sure you're missing Perloff Hall. So you can see down this corridor that we've recreated the basement where CityLAB lives and our shared jury rooms where this exhibition is installed. Each house sign you see down the hallway marks a different project room. This welcome board that we're looking at now is a guide to the exhibition spaces, and since you'll be invited to roam the exhibition independently after the panel discussion, it also shows you how to stroll through this very user-friendly platform. This particular Perloff is the result of Melissa Rovner's creative genius. She's a doctoral student in architecture and essential member of CityLAB. All our work, in fact, is collaborative and indebted to our partners, students, colleagues, and staff who are recognized throughout the exhibit. Today's event has three components: this gallery walk, which is really a teaser for your longer visits later; the first panel at 12:20 with distinguished civic leaders who will discuss design for spatial justice in Los Angeles, followed at 1 p.m. by the final panel of architects and urbanists from across the country who will introduce their practices and activist paths for architects. At CityLAB, our mission is to leverage design and research towards spatial justice goals. Today, we'll start by sharing our in-progress work, projects that lift up housing access, community engagement, and repressed spatial histories in order to inch closer to the world we all want to live in. At no time in my life has our collective labor mattered more than in 2020, especially since our collectivities must remain remote. As we move down the hall on the right, you see here three comprehensive graphic summaries of CityLAB's portfolio. CityLAB began in 2006 and has steadily grown since then in terms of mentoring its students, its impacts, its partnerships, and its design experimentation. You'll soon meet members of the CityLAB team as they describe the projects they lead. Unlike an architectural office, CityLAB undertakes multi-year interconnected projects that are initiated to address tough issues where design makes a difference. And in this first room, we'll see one such project, School Lands Housing, that deploys design to demonstrate that schools can and should become sites for affordable housing. Kenny.
Thanks, Dana. Hi, everyone. I'm Kenny Wong, Assistant Director of Design Research at CityLAB. I'm showing this project, School Lands Housing, where CityLAB brings a design focus to policy discussions addressing California's housing crisis. We use creative site and building design to connect education and housing and guide how affordable housing might be built on public school district-owned land. Many districts across the state are interested in the idea, and these properties form a network that serves over 6.1 million K-12 students and employs close to 320,000 teachers. Think of the area of San Diego, but with 4.5 times the population. We build on the examples completed by districts and learn from the precedents that you saw further to the left. Over the past summer, we narrowed in on 2 of these sites to design test case studies that show a breadth of conditions and strategies that might be translated elsewhere. At Berkeley Unified, we use the surface parking lot across from an urban high school campus. This case extends one approach typical for housing and what you might call the low-hanging fruit. We draw on the site's history, neighborhood assets, and local incentives to modulate the project's potential and push for additional benefits to the adjacent campus. As we make our way back to San Jose Unified, you'll see that this room is really set up like an architecture pinup you might see on any other day in Perloff. At San Jose Unified, we looked at large combined middle and high school campuses in a suburban context. The active schools and surrounding fabric set up an unconventional challenge, which some might see as just out of reach. However, on this large campus, we can introduce elements that might be unexpected, but have transformative effects, like acupuncture. Intensifying the use of an empty corner can relieve tension elsewhere. A holistic look shows potential for an approach unfolding over time, one that reduces disruptions and responds to campus adjacencies to offer varied housing typologies. Hopefully, this shows how these 2 cases can be site-specific and prototypical. We tackle the particular design problems they raise in order to develop a toolkit of strategies. They help us demonstrate how design can help open the door for new solutions and how architects need to be. With that, I'll turn it over to Dana.
As we move across the hall, we'll enter what we in Perloff, where you'll see some of the real benefits of a lab that's housed within a premier public university in the United States. Jacqueline.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Barrios, a PhD candidate here in the English department and Urban Humanities Fellow. In 2012, with generous support from the Mellon Foundation, we launched the Urban Humanities Initiative, which has now graduated almost 200 students from its certificate program, and in 2019 launched an off-campus city lab called CoLab in Westlake MacArthur Park. To begin with, I would like to describe one of our most recent projects. What you're looking at right now is the Digital Salon, a podcast series and multimedia blog meditating on the theme of the portal. Our project is really a story about the pandemic, produced by the alumni and affiliated practitioners of UHI. In seeking for a way to connect, we rallied around novelist and activist and former architecture student Arundhati Roy's provocation that the pandemic is a portal. Our pilot episode excitingly led with an interview with Roy herself, who explained how important the study of architecture and city planning is to our process of creating fiction. As you can see, laid out on the wall are covers of our 6 episodes that foreground sonic practices from novel readings to sound walks, from audio collages to interviews, all hosted and contextualized within a multimedia and interactive blog and website. In our part of the gallery, you can click the music button beneath each cover to hear a short blurb about each episode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Gustavo Leclerc, and I'm the Associate Director of CityLAB and the Urban Humanities Initiative. The Ecolex Urbano project is an ongoing urban humanities research and pedagogical experiment we conducted last spring with our graduate students, focusing on special justice issues in the Westlake MacArthur Park area. The Ecolex project was inspired by pre-Columbian Aztec and Mystic codices. These are narratives of significant historical, social, and cultural events. Our e-codex uses text, images, maps, graphics, and sounds and storytelling.
One of our projects, the Lonchera Archive Ecolex, is a mobile living archive, providing resources and a platform for storytelling for actors in the under-recognized economies of LA and Tijuana. The Lonchera archives can be considered a mobile black box of sorts, consisting of a ledger, digital resource, a narrative map, and a physical Lonchera truck, which acts as a moving link between MacArthur Park and Los Angeles and Tijuana. Food trucks are intricate part of turning sidewalks into activity centers, or what we call special verbs. As part of our ongoing study of sidewalk ecologies in Westlake, and in collaboration with two community partners organizations, Heart of Los Angeles, OLA, and San Barnabas Senior Center, the Banqueteando project conceptualizes the sidewalk as a verb. LA's sidewalks are complex, dynamic, contested spaces that include different users and functions that can change from day to night and from weekdays to weekends.
Thank you, Gustavo. Accessible, affordable, inclusive housing has been a guiding star for CityLAB over the past 15 years. We realized we didn't have to go far to find a housing insecure community. It exists right here at UCLA and on every college campus in the country. Although permanent housing is certainly the goal, we now see housing as a continuum of accommodation. This project for long distance commuters to campus replaces the idea of an emergency shelter bed with a prototype for short-term overnight stays on campus. Gus.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gus Wendell, the Assistant Director of CityLAB, and I'm going to share with you our project titled the Brew Hub, which further demonstrates CityLAB's approach to understanding the housing transportation nexus through design research. What you're looking at in the photograph image to the left is the first prototype of a study pod, which is designed as a spot for commuting students to study, nap, and wait out traffic. In 2018, CityLAB began to look into the issue of students who sleep overnight in their cars or in other common areas like libraries, study lounges, or in the case of our home department, the studio. Our preliminary study found that there is an under-acknowledged phenomenon of students at UCLA who sleep in their cars and other common spaces on campus because they either want to avoid the long commute home or they don't have access to a place to sleep or some combination of both. This led to further investigation and collaboration with partners like UCLA Transportation, Housing, Recreation, First Year Experience, and the Bruin commuters to conduct a study at the nexus of housing insecurity and transportation and ask the question, what does mobility justice look like? What is clear from our research is that increasing commute times combined with the high cost of living in and around Westwood, many UCLA students must choose between either spending the night in their cars and common spaces or make other financial sacrifices in order to live closer to campus, like buying fewer groceries. UCLA students who face long commutes comprise a population of housing insecure students whose needs have not been met and who have called for the creation of a safe and convenient space on campus to nap, sleep, store belongings, wait out traffic, and build community. The Brew Hub, what you're seeing on display here in front of you, is intended to do just that. And our team of architects, led by Marta Novak, designed the Brew Hub based on student commuters' input. Located in the heart of the John Wooden Center, the Brew Hub is conceived as a 24/7 on-campus space for commuting students and is outfitted with up to 16 study pods. As I mentioned, this summer we produced the first full-scale prototype of the study pod so that when students return to campus, they'll find this cool little home away from home. Thank you.
As with the Brew Hub, which depends on real commitment from our UCLA administrative partners, the next room takes us out into the city where an ongoing project reflects the collective efforts of a large group of interested parties. Grupo Nuevo, named after our community partners, is a CityLAB's first effort to address homelessness in the city and the critical recognition that our now 70,000 unhoused neighbors are part of unacknowledged community ecologies. Rain.
Hi, I'm Rain Laborde, CityLAB Research Fellow. At CoLab, we're defining new research methods and interventions in order to build compassionate community. Most often, that means finding ways to negotiate contested spaces, as in this project, where we worked with Grupo Nuevo Los Angeles to address concerns of student safety and belonging near their high school campus. The area is surrounded by high-speed traffic, including the 101 freeway, as well as significant long-term encampments. Interviews, which allowed us to get to know the site in the time of COVID, revealed a fragmented community with many tensions and misunderstandings, largely towards unhoused neighbors who have lived in encampments for as long as 7 years. Drawing from interviews and site analysis, we developed a community engagement plan for the school based in mutual support and spatial justice, rather than enforcement or penalization. This led us to Hoover Juntos, a replicable and phased series of interventions flowing down Hoover Street to the school. Rejecting traditional CEPTED or crime prevention through environmental design approaches, Hoover Juntos instead floods the street with spaces to come together based in anchor values of innovation, equity, and joy. And Hoover Juntos, really, while these methods of site research and intervention framework are replicable, specific interventions for this high school campus are centered on getting to know and invest in relationships with neighbors, both housed and unhoused. Human connection plays an important role in supporting students and encampment residents, as does design. Restoring spaces for lingering, resting, and gathering visualizes neighborhood reinvestment while destigmatizing the everyday life and needs of vulnerable Angelenos.
Thanks, Rain. This concludes our gallery walk through the second annual exhibition of CityLAB's summer projects, the collective effort of more than a dozen UCLA graduate and undergraduate students. Their promise and talent bode very well for us for transforming the world in ways that work toward a common good and a just anti-racist future. We hope you'll come back to Virtual Perloff after the panel discussions to take a closer look and check back on our CityLAB website over the coming year to see the progress we've made on these initiatives.
Let's see, I think I've stopped sharing now. So Gustavo and I are just going to chat for a little bit about some of the kind of larger issues around CityLAB, CoLab, urban humanities for a moment. I think I would just like to raise one point that Rain said in her last conversation about the Grupo Nuevo project, that every project we do is really intended to be a prototype, to make a model of a type of project that really doesn't fit easily within conventional art. And in that, we're hoping to build architectural projects for practicing architects. We don't stand in as a community design center doing work that's specifically geared towards a solution at a particular site in a particular point in time for a particular client, and we don't take commissions. It's really seen as a research venture that produces generic or projects that can proliferate. So I think our most successful project is one that we didn't show in this exhibition because it started 10 years ago and really reached its fruition 2 years ago. And that was one that we called Backyard Homes, where we started off with this idea that really, if Los Angeles was the mother of all suburbs, it ought to also produce its offspring. And we should be finding solutions to the post-suburban city, both environmentally, in terms of affordable housing, and making the city more walkable. And our solution to that was to double the density of Los Angeles's residential areas by showing and demonstrating that we could add secondary units, granny flats or accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in all across the city. Where that ended after doing a full-scale demonstration project of a backyard home at the School of the Arts and Architecture, which was a really exciting little project that something like 12 or 14 architecture students worked on with us. We co-authored state law, which basically ended single-family zoning in the state of California. And if you look into the data, there are 8.1 million single-family sites, single-family home properties in the state, which means there are now the potential for 8 million theoretically rental units that will be smaller, that are built by the occupants, residents themselves, and really add a huge amount of housing stock to the state's inventory something that's absolutely necessary. One of the pleasures that I have is when I talk about that now, people say, well, why didn't you triple the density? Why didn't you say it was possible to put 2 units behind every house? And that just shows how the conversation has shifted over these last 10 years. That's basically the kind of work we're trying to do also with the school lands housing project, which is to take design as the lever to demonstrate that alternative futures are possible that are more equitable and more just and more affordable. And then we would write the legislation that would allow for the architectural projects to proliferate. Gustavo, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the ways students are involved with urban humanities and the kind of program that that is.
Yes, the students can get involved in the Urban Humanities Initiative program in many different ways. It's currently the focus of the program is a graduate program, but also we welcome participation from undergraduates. Our focus is Los Angeles, and this year we're focusing primarily in the Westlake Pico Union area, as I mentioned earlier. One thing that I'd like to mention also that, to respond, to understand and to respond to the complex, some sort of special justice issues in cities like Los Angeles, it requires innovative methods of inquiry. So we've been experimenting or trying out different forms of urban analysis, and that we use methods such as thick mapping, which some of you probably are already familiar, but also especially ethnographies, digital storytelling, filmic sensing. We work with filmmakers to create, how we can understand complex urban environments through the experience of film. And in 2 weeks, we're going to try a new method, podcast or sonic narrative, working with 2 or great urban humanities and CityLAB collaborators, Gus Wendell. So all this to say that our projects are multi-layer, multimodal, and some sort of requires the involvement of many, many people, from community partners to graduate students to associate professors and other programs. And also, we welcome undergraduate students to be part of and any of the programs that we are in the Urban Humanities Initiative.
We often teach a summer institute to undergraduates. We didn't in this past year because of the pandemic, but plan to initiate that again, which is the most recent one was a collaboration with the Bunch Center for African American Studies called Big Data for Social Justice. So there's a wide range of and I think we could open it up to any questions that might appear in the chat at this point. Is that the way you'd like to do it, Jane, or is there?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's welcome people
format
to put questions in the chat. I actually have a question to start us off. Looking at these various projects that you explained, I'm thinking specifically about Brew Hub. What has been the effect of that thinking and that design in the time of COVID? I'm sure that's altered a number of these projects.
Yes, gosh, everything got thrown into a new sort of terrain once we had to go remote. Right now, we've been producing the prototype for the Brew Hub. So we actually have one little pod. It's not very little. It's actually like it's a pretty great object and space to work and sleep in. It's actually in Wooden Center now. And staff and the people who are allowed to be on campus are giving us feedback about it. As we were planning that pod, we got word that all the materials had to be COVID aware, and basically essential that every surface had to be capable of being wiped down with, or maybe had to have some kind of ultraviolet light cleansing between users. And we redesigned the entire thing in order to create COVID safety. So it has a little screen so that the person doesn't have any direct, it's almost like a mask over the pod itself in a way, so that you could rest in there and feel secure in terms of health safety. And it actually made the whole thing better. So Marta Novak is a really talented designer, and she worked with all of the public health guidance, so that the materials, the design, the way you enter it, the way we will schedule people in and out of it is all COVID safe. And hopefully in the middle of it also, so it's intended to go in the Wooden Center, which is a perfect place for it because there are showers there and lockers there and a 24-hour staffing. So it'll be very safe. That building is getting seismic upgrades. So the whole building is now under construction, and we're hoping that part of the rebuilding of Wooden for earthquake safety will include the opening up of these racquetball courts, so that that could become this Bruin hub.
Just want to, relate to your question, Jane, about some sort of working during COVID. That affects us also very directly in how we conduct research. Our projects rely heavily on direct field work. And we couldn't do that during the COVID. So we have to some sort of kind of think about how we do meaningful, engage field work at a distance remotely. And that's what we try, either for pedagogical purpose or research purpose, and with the Ecolex, some sort of kind of, was a form of experiment to doing meaningful research remotely. And the students were created fantastic projects, very multi-layered with strong content, very creative. That's the other side of the challenge of doing of thinking about how to do this type of research when you cannot have direct field work. Is creativity really, and our students did fantastic projects. The projects called the Ecolex are available in the CityLAB UHI website.
I was actually wondering, Gustavo, with your work as well, so much of it seems to be bringing community together, various aspects of community, people who might inhabit the same space, like in the various Westlake sites that might not have the opportunity to interact or the impetus to interact with one another. How is COVID affecting that in the ways that you're trying to make common space and community and commonality between these various residents and the people that use these sites?
Yeah, that's a excellent question. I mean, and I think the Grupo Nuevo project was a good test because we did a project last summer during COVID, and everything from the beginning had to be done. I mean, from the first meeting with the clients from the Grupo Nuevo was on Zoom. Everything pretty much. We did some interviews with a social distance with some of the unhoused, some of the stakeholders in the neighborhood, and some other interviews were by phone. But some sort of it was an interesting challenge. But I think it's possible with some creativity and with some sort of to do research during COVID.
We're starting a research project that involves senior citizens and youth around the public spaces in the Lafayette MacArthur Park area, and getting them involved via technology. It's a whole new game. So we started off a project that Gustavo and Rain, you met on the tour, sent kits of materials out to the kids to start doing this kind of mapping of their neighborhood. But, it's a wild card of like what you get back. We're still learning basically of these new methods, especially with the digital divide, and then the sort of age divide with young kids whose attention span might be short and seniors whose computer skills are uneven. It's really challenged us, and part of what we do, what we're most proud of, especially through the urban humanities, is our inventive and innovative cross-disciplinary methods. So it's really expanded our ways of thinking about methodology.
Oh, that's interesting. How has that kind of in your day-to-day lives as professors, how has that affected how you're teaching online, thinking about teaching architecture via Zoom, teaching design via Zoom? How are you finding that experience right now?
Well, it was definitely a shock when it began, but I think we're both taking advantage of it. It's always you have to start looking at these things as half full, since there really is nothing but coping and adaptation that's possible at this point. And one of the things that's been most useful to us is the low carbon footprint, ease of guest visitors that we can engage. So when we're reading a book, we can invite the author to come to the class. And the work that we do across border, which we loved taking students into Tijuana or to Mexico City. Now with a phone call and a Zoom link, we're basically bringing our Mexican partners to work in our own classroom. And that's been pretty effective. We've had really wide-ranging guests and conversations that have been, I think, quite meaningful to the students.
Yeah, I agree. I've just found that in my own day-to-day work that it's a lot easier to connect, to have various professors, alums, when you cut out that transportation time and everything else that goes into it, you really are able to connect much more quickly over Zoom, and the technology is a lot easier. Absolutely.
And also in the classes that we've been teaching, in the seminars, we find that when there's new creative, some sort of exploring new ways of inquiry or new methods, even taking into account the Zoom exhaustion, they get really engaged. And I mean, now in this quarter, we're teaching a class from 6 to 9, which is not very, but that day the students are mostly Zoom exhausted. But because we're exploring new methods, working with different artists or filmmakers, it makes it more engaging, and the response has been very positive so far.
That's great.
The other thing that's true is our meeting schedules, although we're all Zoomed out, basically, it's much easier to set the collaborative meetings that CityLAB's research depends upon. So I just left a meeting with LA County Planning Department leadership, where they've asked CityLAB to help them think through what an anti-racist zoning code would look like. And we're studying that through the creation of a kind of homeless and community and internet divide hub, so that we could actually enhance parks and libraries services and create stronger community bonds through real needs that people have in one particular community that we're working in. But the people that we want to meet with are much more accessible to us. We miss not meeting them in real terms, but it allows us to do design work that we can then show. They can then collaborate and critique what we're doing. We bring it back to them. And that's been actually really fantastic, because that iterative partnership is essential to the kind of work that we do, so that it's meaningful and really feasible when we're finished with it. It's not abstract research, what happens at CityLAB. It's intended to have real impacts. And for the most part, we've been very successful with them.
Well, with these projects that you're working on and this amazing video that you just showed us as we kind of went through Perloff Hall, how can people see that to learn more about what CityLab is doing and what this research is resulting in? I'd love to, if there's a website or maybe a link one of you can throw in the chat, I'd love to share that with people because I think there was so much in each of those presentations that were really rich with information and data and things to explore that I would love people to be able to go back and really take their time walking through Perloff Hall.
I'll put the link to this platform where you get your own avatar and you can go visit the exhibition yourself into the chat. I put our CityLAB and Urban Humanities web addresses in the chat, but while Gustavo is talking about something else, I'll get the link to the hub's site.
Also, you feel free to contact us through email or by phone or any other method. Yeah, we're always very, eager to talk with anyone that's interested in the work we do, to try find ways to engage, engage them in what we do. There is many opportunities and many different ways to be part of the projects, particularly in the CoLab. It's been a little over a year, and it's has grown tremendously, and it's gonna just keep growing. In last year we focused on sidewalks. Now we're focusing on public parks and three scales: large scale MacArthur Park, the medium scale Lafayette Park, and a small park called Golden Age, which is catered for seniors, but it's used by everyone. So that's the research that we're going to focus next. We're starting practically now.
Well,
so I just put the link in the chat to get to the hub site. You'll see when you get there that you have to kind of experiment with how to drive your avatar through, but don't give up easily. Just stick it out, and it's pretty fun once you work your way into the exhibition and into Perloff Hall. It's a desperate attempt on our part to bring space back into the world we are living in at the moment with our virtual Perloff.
Well, it's a pretty remarkable project, as are all the research projects within that presentation in virtual Perloff. So I encourage everybody to go explore, make yourself an avatar. And it's, as we're all on computers, it's an antidote, I think, to Zoom fatigue, because you actually get to move and be in a space. So please go and explore that space. And I want to thank Professor Cuff and Professor Leclerc. Thank you so much for spending this time with us and talking about the work of CityLab and CoLab. And thank you to everyone for attending today. This is actually the last of our lunch labs for the month. And I'm going to post very quickly. We have all of the past lunch labs and some other events and talks that UCLA Arts has hosted. They're all on our YouTube channel. So please take a moment to go and explore those, learn more about what UCLA and the School of the Arts and Architecture are currently doing. So thank you again to Professor Cuff and Professor Leclerc, and I hope everyone enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.